We are recording. Hi, everyone. Hi, Caitlin, Michelle, Sherry, hi.
Hello, how do we access the recordings after?
I'll post a link. I put it on our YouTube channel, and then I'll post a link in the book club with that replay.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Glad you could make it today. Redina, welcome. Vincent, welcome. Adrian, welcome. Looks like we're still waiting for our author to come in. We're all hoping she's not in some severe weather. Is everyone else getting snow? I know John is. Hi, Bobby.
Hi, how are you?
Good, good to see you.
Good to see you.
How's the new website treating you?
I feel like it's one of those commercials, you know, like set it and forget it.
Oh yeah, good.
It's doing its job, maybe a little too well, but that's a good problem to have.
Yes.
Yeah, thanks.
I like that problem. What do we got? We've got, I'm in Toronto and 2 feet of snow yesterday. Yes, Michelle. There's a lot of snow going on. I'm in the Pacific Northwest and we're like dry over here. So I don't mean to rub it in at all, but like 32 degrees, kind of sunny. So we just got like good weather, good winter weather. Hi, Winnie. Okay. Adara's coming in. Welcome. Yeah, 120 plus Fahrenheit in Australia. Ricky, nobody is jealous.
No, I think I would rather the cold.
Yes. Oh, I couldn't even imagine. That's the epiphany. You should go do the egg on the sidewalk and post that in the book club for us.
I saw a post on social media that was the opposite of that, you know, cracking an egg and it's freezing as it's going down.
Oh man.
Probably artificial intelligence generated, but it was entertaining.
Good one, good one. Hey Autumn, welcome. Oh, looks like Regine has joined us. Hello, our guest of honor. All right, well, it looks like everyone's here to get started. Ricky, would you like to officially start the club meeting for us?
Sure. Welcome everyone to the January Accessibility Book Club session. Our book, as you know, for this month is Inclusive Design for a Digital World, which is a second edition put together by our author who is with us today. Now, I should just check, what's the right way to pronounce your name? I'm assuming it's Reginé. Reginé Gilbert, is that correct?
Correct.
He's
Yeah.
right.
Yeah, Reginé. Hi, everybody.
Hello, Reginé. Thanks very much for joining us. And congratulations on your book. It's an amazing piece of work. Just for the size of it, it's incredible.
Yeah. I didn't know, honestly, until I received it, how big it was, because I had an editor working on it and he said, oh, they'll edit it. But they didn't really cut that much out. So
okay.
It ended up being a lot larger than I expected.
All right. Well, before we get to talking about the book, could you tell us a little bit about yourself? I know in the book you've said your journey, but we're assuming not everyone has read the book here. So tell us a little bit about who you are, where you are, how you got to doing what you're doing now.
Yeah, sure. I'm currently actually, I'm an industry associate professor at New York University, where I teach user experience design and assistive technologies. This semester, I'm actually teaching an agile product design course and a course called Looking Forward, where we teach students about the assistive tech that blind and low vision folks use. I write about that course in the book. My experience to get into accessibility started about 11 years ago. I haven't been in it for that long, but I really became passionate about it after I took a course and there was only one slide on accessibility. And I said, I want to know more. I want to make the world a more accessible place. And so I started getting really into it, going to meetups, learning about it, and then eventually speaking about it. And then I got asked to write about it, which is when I wrote the first edition back in 2018. It was released in 2019. So my background is in product management, user experience design. I worked a long time in IT and supply chain. I was a fashion designer. I have a varied history when it comes to my career path, but I have been, I think, pretty steadfast on accessibility the last 11 years.
Right, that's really interesting. And I think one of the things we found out from the book club is that almost everyone has an unusual path into digital accessibility. You know, I had a whole other career as an actor way before I got into any kind of tech. But from your perspective, so you've got kind of, your perspective is on the one hand academic, on the other hand as a practitioner. So, and this book is really written from the perspective of kind of an observer. Is that a fair assessment there?
I would say so, yeah. When I was working on the second edition, I had someone look at the first edition and they said, you know, you need more of your voice. In the years since I wrote the first book, I've done a lot of stuff. And I've learned a lot from others. And I also liked, I got different perspectives, like Dr. Claire Ferrari is mentioned in the book, where she created a course for blind folks to learn how to code. And so I tell her story. I tell the story of a person, Victoria Ota in Nigeria, who started the first accessibility meetup in Lagos. And so those were one of the big things. Like I realized, like, it's inclusive design for a digital world, but I kept it pretty Western. And so I wanted this time to make it a little bit more broad. So a lot of learnings along the way.
Yeah, that's a thing I noticed. I was familiar with the first edition of your book. In fact, I put it on one of the first lists I put together in 2020 of, digital accessibility books you have to read. But I did notice in this edition there was more of your personal voice and more individual stories and a broader geographical coverage, which I think is, a great way to approach a second edition of a book, to expand it. Were there any specific kind of areas that in the first edition you thought, I now have to cover this? I mean, an obvious one that stands out is AI. You almost can't ignore AI, so you have to say something about it these days. Were there any specific kind of areas that you thought, okay, I need to address this in the second edition? Yeah,
I do mention AI like this much in the first edition, but this time I started the first chapter with AI because I think it's important to note, and I say that AI is the missing ramp, because it is, because a lot of the data that exists does not include folks with disabilities, nor does it include folks of different cultures. So that's why I brought that into the forefront with work that was done under the Biden administration around, bias with AI. And so I think that that is an important thing that we address, that we talk about, that a lot of people aren't. They're like, we could use this for, we can use AI for everything. We can, but how reliable is it, right? Like, we need to make sure that the information that we're getting out of that is the best we can, and that it is actually inclusive of folks with disabilities, because oftentimes it's not.
Yeah. That's it. I really enjoyed and appreciated the way you approached discussion of artificial intelligence in the book. I mean, it's one thing that is kind of, people get a little bit frightened about talking about it, only because it changes so quickly. So as soon as you put things in black and white on a page, it's out of date. But the way you've approached it on principles is not going to go out of date in any hurry. And I think the issues that you raise are very current. And they're, interestingly enough, I think the AI vendors themselves are starting to recognize that these things need to be addressed. That, you know, things like the bias that they have in the data they access works against people with disabilities. There are a couple of books out there. I've just read one that links AI, genetics, and disability, and it's an extreme view, but it's quite frightening about how AI can be a weapon used against people with disability, marginalizing them entirely. And I really appreciated the treatment you gave it in the book. Before we go any further, I guess we have to assume that not everybody here has read the book. So could you give us just a little bit of an outline of how you structured the book?
Sure. So I decided to kind of keep with the idea of the first edition, to start off with designing with accessibility in mind, and then thinking about what, you know, I'm a designer, so I think from like a designer perspective, but it goes from designing with accessibility in mind. When it's, and sorry, I don't have the book right in front of me because I gave my last book away. But when something's annoying,
it's not accessible.
Which in the first edition, it was one of my favorite things to write. And this time it was fun because I put a thing out on LinkedIn for people to contribute to like what's annoying, and it really blew up into this wonderful list. The book also goes into user research, thinking about things from a systems perspective. I have an extensive chapter on assistive technologies because I felt from the first edition I touched on assistive tech, and I think the chapter was labeled assistive tech but didn't really talk about assistive tech. And this time I tried to do it in a way that was a little bit more, I think, friendly to folks who don't really know what assistive tech is or how it's really weaved into our lives without us noticing it. You know, so many people use speech to text on their phones but never think, oh, I'm using assistive technology, for example. And then looking at, in the first edition, I was talking a little bit about AR and VR, and I still do in this edition, but I also talk about things like self-driving cars and things of that nature. So, and also from a multicultural perspective, looking at how we need to change things and think about language and how to do that when you're doing some sort of bootstrap type of work. So the book kind of ebbs and flows through all of those things.
Yeah, I think you've been incredibly successful in drawing a very broad perspective there. There are books that are about accessible design that are very code focused, that are very individual website or app focused, but I think you draw a much bigger picture to give a broader perspective on that. And I think there is a lot of positive stuff in there about that we see changing at the moment about how we perceive people with disability. The very notion of it being, you know, edge case and a tiny minority of people is just so far removed from the reality of daily life. And the AT stuff is a good example of that, that people use like captions on videos. They're not thinking of it as assistive technology. It's just a feature that makes it easier to absorb the content. And I think you capture a lot of that really, really well. My kind of perception of the book was that it was intended as a kind of a reference book. So there's a lot of information at the back about legislation, about resources, all of that kind of stuff. So it's not really a book that you read necessarily from start to finish like a novel.
No, I mean, when I saw that this was going to be the book for the book club, I was like, oh no, because I never wrote the book with the intention of like, oh, you're going to sit there and read it. It is not.
Yeah,
I didn't write it that way. I didn't write the first one that way either. I probably should have said that in the beginning, but I wrote it as, you know what, I'm working on this thing. I need to reference this book. Yeah. That's the thing that I think it's one of those things that you keep on the shelf and you say, this is what I want to be working on. And let me pull this off the shelf, because that's how people used the first one. And to be honest, I've used where I was like, because I forgot what I've written, like
Sure.
my brain just completely forgets. But shout out to the folks who read it in a continuous way, because it wasn't meant to be that way. But if you were able to read it, thank you so much. And I'm just, Crystal, thank you for picking my book for the book club, or whoever else makes those decisions, because I really was surprised and appreciate it.
Look, I will say that as because I knew I was going to host this session, I did read the whole thing from start to finish, and it works. It works. There's no question of that. But it's interesting. There were things that I noticed that in different chapters and sections, you repeat the message. And I assume that's intended because somebody could be picking it up, that they're looking for a specific piece of information. So they pick up a chapter in the middle of the book, and you want to make sure they get all the messages there. So there's a kind of a confirmation of those basic messages that happen in chapter after chapter. And reading it from start to finish, you kind of go, why am I being told this 4 times? But once you realize that this is intended as a reference work, it makes perfect sense. So that was kind of a revelation to me during the course of reading the book. But it still works as a complete book, and I really appreciated it. It was, as somebody who's been working in digital accessibility for 25 years or more, there was a lot in there that came as a surprise to me, and a lot I learned from it. So I really appreciated that.
That's so awesome, Ricky. Thank you. And the thing that I do when teaching is if something's important, I repeat it at least 3 times. Because if I repeat it, then it's like more likely to stick. If I say something once, it's not going to stick. If I say it twice, you'll be like, why'd you say it 2 times? But if I say it 3 times, you'll be like, that's important. And so that's why and even when I was writing, I was like, oh, this is repetitive, but I want it to stick. Yeah. And so I kept it that way.
Yeah, that works. Crystal.
Yeah, that's so good. Thank you for explaining that. We were actually having a bit of a chat before you came in, and that was one thing that we had found in common, was a common theme or thread. And so that makes absolute sense, because some of those points, I did end up skimming a little bit, because of like, I heard you over here, and then I heard you over here, and I'm like, yes, I get it, right? Because you're right, those were the most important points though. And if you are like selecting that chapter and picking it up for the first time and jumping in, you're getting that awesome reminder. So thank you for explaining that, and for doing that in the book though, because you're right. I think having that repeated over and over, like we get it, right? That's what you're trying to do, embed those thoughts.
Thanks, Crystal. Look, I'm hoping that there will be some questions from other people attending, but in the meantime, I'm going to throw a question at you, which is probably a bit preemptive at this stage, but given what's on the horizon with digital accessibility, including AI, but also looking at things like the 3rd version of the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines, which as I understand it, is a whole game changer, or a different way of less of a pass fails on success criteria approach, and notwithstanding that there's been 5 years between the 2 editions, do you see yourself working on a 3rd edition? Come on.
I have friends and family on this call, so they know that's not no. And the thing is, I had 3 overlapping books at the same time. I think you're going to have another one of my books for your book club later on this year. So I not anytime soon, I will say that. I think that we'll see how this goes. One of the things that I did put emphasis on for this particular book is the European Accessibility Act. As we've seen things change in the United States, we've also seen things change in the European Union with the European Accessibility Act, which went into effect last June. And we need to. I thought more people would be rolling things out with accessibility, and it's been a slow go in the European Union, surprisingly. So I think we're going to be seeing a lot more advancements, because I think, we've already seen some legal proceedings begin, but I think we're going to see more similar to what we've seen in the US in the past. So I'm very hopeful that we're going to see more people learning about accessibility. We'll see it more widespread, especially in Europe and other places. There's been big pushes around things, so we'll see how things go.
Yeah, that's very interesting, because I'm here in Australia at the moment, and we're in a very interesting position because we get to watch a lot of what happens in the rest of the world and sort of see how things pan out. On the other hand, Australia was one of the first to have a National Discrimination Act, the Disability Discrimination Act. The only trouble is it hasn't changed since 1992. And obviously, life has changed a lot since then. So it's actually currently undergoing review. In the meantime, the underpinning technical standard for the European Accessibility Act, EN 301549, is being adopted by government agencies, which tend to be the ones that lead the way in these things here. And they've taken some interesting kind of steps, like our digital strategy is that rather than referring to a version of WCAG, the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines, they're saying adopt whatever is the current version, which is an interesting kind of way to go. And it's a bold move because you don't know exactly what that's going to be, So here we're currently going through the process of updating the legislation, but then we're still having to deal with those things like in America, it's very litigation based. So it's very complaint based and get a lawyer to start a lawsuit. In Europe, it's more get the government agencies to provide enforcement of some sort. And as you point out, that's a glacially slow process. And it's interesting to see all these things happening around the world and in Africa too. I think in some African countries, they're absolutely leading the way of making bold legislative moves. And I think the way you cover that.
I mentioned Kenya and Nigeria in the book specifically. So there is progress happening, yet it's slow, but we're going to see. And, I always say, please keep an eye on that continent. Because that continent, unlike the rest of the world, that continent has the youngest population in the world and some very, very smart people and very ambitious folks. And whereas, you have in the US, like very different US and Europe have aging populations. And I keep telling people, if you want the next $1 million idea, start making things more accessible, because it's, in the next 9 years in the US, we're going to have more people over the age of 65 than under the age of 65. Right. Things will have to be accessible. There just isn't. It's silly to me that we've seen all these layoffs because people are going to get rehired. Yeah, people aren't going to be able to actually function when things aren't accessible. So there's a direction to head in that we are going to have to go, whether we like it or not.
Yeah. Now, Sherry, you've got your hand up there. Would you like to say something? Or was that just an accident? I do that all the time.
Sorry.
No, that's okay. No worries at all. Do we have any questions from participants at the moment? If not, I'll just keep going with mine.
Well, Michelle just posted something in the chat. Michelle, did you want to hop on, or would you like me to read that one?
No, I can hop on. Hi, Reginé. I'm back in Valentina's workshop in the summer. Anyway, I was just wondering, so Canada is similar to Europe in the sense of that legislation changes happen through either human rights cases, and it's the government really pushing, but the government has no follow through with regard to making sure that accessibility is actually being done, that designers are actually committing to accessibility. I'm part of the Association of Registered Graphic Designers in Canada, and we have an accessibility guide that is available We actually just launched a website as well that's available to designers to reference. So if you're ever looking for anything. But what I'm wondering is, do you have any suggestions from your own work of how you can help make designers and companies more accountable to creating products and publications and websites that are accessible and taking into account, even system design works, taking into account accessibility. Sorry, that was really long.
No, thank you, and thank you for sharing that. And if you have a link, that would be great if you could share it in the chat, so folks on the call can have access to that. The question you ask is a big one, and it really depends on the context within which the organization is working, because you have levels of maturity when it comes to accessibility and what people know and what they don't. And so when people don't know a lot, you can't fault them, right, for not knowing what to do. And so what I've found, and I've done plenty, I have done, you name it, I've probably done a workshop there. So what I have found is that there needs to be continuous education around it, right? And I will say one of the more successful, I won't say who the organization is, but what they did was they would bring in people monthly to cover different subject matters around accessibility, right? They made it part of their workflow. They made it part of their maintenance. And I think that one, it starts with the awareness, but then you have to move from awareness to action. There's a lot around like, oh yeah, we need to do this stuff, or here's a guide. But then how are we incorporating this into our workflow? There's a bit of change management with that. So I think it's little by little. There are some organizations that seem allergic to the word accessibility, which, it is what it is. And so what I tell people, say, don't say it then. Don't say the word accessibility. There are things that you can do to make things accessible without saying the words. And so I think that's one way to approach it. But again, Michelle, it depends on the context. It depends on the maturity. It really is specific to that organization, that team, how much they're willing to incorporate into the workflow. And I'm just a fan of planting seeds. So if people don't like the word accessibility, then don't use it. If you do like the word accessibility, use it. But there are things that you could do around readability, legibility, looking at colors. Is this on brand? Are we sure people can see this? Have we tested this with my grandmother? Right? Like this kind of thing can be applied and asked, like, oh, my grandma can't use this site. Which is just like saying, we're not making this accessible. So, I took my glasses off and I couldn't see that thing on the screen. It's all kinds of things that you could say and do that don't make it so obvious. Because again, some people are allergic to accessibility for whatever reasons.
Yeah. I usually sneak it in with my work. Thank you.
I hope that answered your.
No, it does help. I think it gives me some guidance because I am always an accessibility advocate. I have a disability myself, and so it's always important for me because I have a disability. Everybody thinks that I am an accessibility expert, which is not the case. I understand accessibility, but I don't understand every kind of accessibility. And so I think some of the things that you said really help to just like help how I can frame the conversation with clients and maybe get more action without being so forthright about it.
Yeah, and especially when you're doing client work, sometimes they're like, oh, that's going to add time and money to the project, and it becomes a whole thing. So
yeah.
Yeah, it's a very good point. I have a talk that I do at a couple of conferences, which is around the language that we use. The very fact that we talk about normal and not normal and abled and disabled gets in the way. And I think Regine's point about just don't use those words goes a long way toward that, you know. Stop making it sound like it's a different kind of life. Now we have a question here before it scrolls out of view from Adrian Grace in California. Regine, what were the biggest changes that surprised you between the two versions of the book?
I would say, I mean, is it in regards to society in general, or to the writing of the book? What do you mean exactly? So I'm answering it. You could just ask.
Adrian, why don't you jump on and verbalize the question, if you're able to. Might not be able to.
Yeah, okay. Well, I would say in regards to from a societal perspective, from the time that I first wrote the book to now, I would say a lot more people know about accessibility, but there's a lot more awareness of it, but the actions behind that awareness still are lacking. I would say in regards to writing the book, I feel like we've seen more from a global perspective. We've seen more people doing accessibility, which has been really nice to see for me. And part of, you know, during the time I was working on this book, I got to travel the world thanks to, I was honored with an award from NYU to be a James Weldon Johnson professor, and that's part of what heavily influenced me, getting to go to Nigeria, getting to go to Singapore, getting to go to Japan, where my book has been translated into Japanese, and my first edition. So getting to see, like, on a more global scale, how people are using it. And recently someone from Norway told me that they're going to be using my book for a new course that they're working on. And so seeing that this book, and yeah, I've had people from Poland, like people, you know, places I never expected. So for me, the biggest thing from 2019 to 2025 was seeing how people all over the world were getting to experience this book and using it and finding it helpful. And I will say this, one of the biggest things that I did my best to do was write it in plain language, because I feel that's important. It's one of those things when you think about inclusion that oftentimes gets left out, is that in the US, the average reading age is 8th grade, which is high compared to some parts of the world, whereas in the UK, 4th grade is the reading level. And on average in the world, right, the reading level is around 10 years old. So with that in mind, and not knowing if English is a second language for folks, I am just a huge, and even though I'm, you know, I work in academia, I will not ever write with words that I have to go look up myself. I really tried my best to make it as plain language as possible. I just think that's really important.
Yeah, that's great stuff. Now, we've got a question here from Crystal, but you're on, so you may as well ask the question yourself. Crystal.
Sure. Yeah, no, I really enjoyed in chapter 8, you talked a lot about the business case for accessibility, right? After you're planting seeds of change and, you know, going into that business case for accessibility. I feel like I've been using that more and more, building accessible websites for folks who have never heard of accessibility before. You know, a lot of business owners in my area, you know, they come to me for a website, but they have no idea that it's supposed to be accessible, right? And so, you know, I'm trying to explain to them why they need the accessibility statement and all those little pieces. And you make such a strong case for that in your book, and how it's not just an ethical decision, but a business decision. So I was just curious if you wanted to expand on that a little bit with what you think leaders most often misunderstand about the cost of not designing for accessibility, and maybe how you explain that to somebody.
Yeah, now thinking about it, because people know on this call, if it don't make dollars, if it don't make sense, like the idea that, and this is something that people have said to me, like, well, we can't do accessibility because it takes a long time. And then I get into, well, the first time it takes a long time. The 5th time it does take a little bit less time. The 20th time, the 30th time, it becomes part of your process, right?
Right.
And when you think, and I wrote about the amount of, in like the amount of profits that people are leaving on the table by not making things accessible is in the billions. It's in the billions. And, again, with the aging populations, and specifically I'm talking about the EU and in the US, you want people to be able to use your product. The more people who can use your product, the more money you make. So when people tell me we don't want to make this accessible, then to me that tells me you don't want to make money.
Yeah, no, I love that.
And honestly, if you want to make more money and you want your business to grow and you want to scale a product, then you will make it accessible. I'm not going to say, oh, well, yes, it's ethical. People don't care about ethics. They do care about money. Yeah. And they do care about making more of it. So if you want to make more of it, you making your product accessible will make it better. You making your product more inclusive will make it better. You having offerings where people can relate, culturally to something, and making that more inclusive will make you more money, right? There are certain colors you don't use in certain areas. There are certain, words you don't say. These things are important. Yes, if it don't make dollars, it don't make sense.
No, I love that. I really do.
I wish I would have named it that.
No, it's good. Yeah, you should have put that in there. That should have been a tagline. But no, there was an instance on LinkedIn where a fellow developer had posted a website and they were really proud of it. And I was like, oh, this website's great, but it had really bad failing contrast requirements, right? I mean, there was just text you could not read. And I made a comment somewhere about, hey, if you ever want to talk about how to make this a little bit more inclusive, opening this up to a wider audience, let me know. And I think their message back was something along the lines of like, oh, my clients don't want to pay for accessibility. And I was like, what do you mean? They want to pay for you to design them a website that not everyone can use? They'd rather pay for that? I was like, my mind was boggled. So no, the way you explained it in here and then the numbers you put behind it really just tied it all together. So thank you for including that in your book.
Thank you. Thank you for the question.
Sherry Lee makes a point in the comment that at the recent CES, the big tech show, that there was a lot of emphasis on accessibility. And that was very much from that point of view of it's just good business. Why would you be ignoring that?
I'm telling you, I mean, yeah, I think Verizon had a stage at CES, and it is, to me, it is the future. Like and thinking about our future selves, which is something that I've done this Designing for Your Future Self workshop since 2019. I first did it with Matt May, who at the time headed up Adobe's inclusive design, and I've done it at so many places. But the thing is, people think about their futures from a financial perspective and all of this, but they don't think about the products that they use every day. How are you making that for your future self, right? And the fact that all of us experience, disability, and I know I'm preaching to the choir with this crowd, but it's like, what are we doing? Some days I'm just like, it doesn't have to be that hard. And again, when people tell me, oh, it's just more work, or yeah, people don't want to pay for it. So what do they want to pay for? A lawyer? Because they will likely get sued. Like that's the alternative to that. So I think that, I don't know, I have such great passion and love to make the world a more accessible place. It's something that I hope we all want for ourselves at the same time, right? We all want to be able to use stuff. And when we can, it's just annoying.
Yeah, yeah. There's to put a slightly more technical question, I guess, to you, that we talk about a lot about digital design as if it is a one single thing. But to me, there is a very big difference between the web and apps on mobile. And it seems to me that to some extent, the mobile world is actually pushing more in the direction of accessibility than the web world is. You can customize your device to suit your specific needs. You don't even necessarily have to even be thinking about accessibility. It's just using the features that make the thing easier to use. But the web seems to be dragging behind in that way. We're stuck with browsers who interpret the web content in ways that block assistive technology rather than adding to it. Do you see a way forward there? How do we get the web to catch up to mobile?
Well, that's such a good question. When more every day, more and more people are using their mobile devices, and even now I'm seeing that like people are doing this vertical production. Like people are making these 90-minute vertical films, right? Like there are like TV shows in 90 minutes, all vertical on your phone. And so, but the reality is not everyone has the latest, greatest phone. Yep. How do I see us looking more at the web? I think we look beyond Europe and beyond America. I think we look to see who's, when we look where most of the world is 1G, 2G, they're not 5G like in the US. And I think that people forget that, people have a lot of, and I do mention like that in the book, that there are a lot of people who use progressive web apps, right, where they use the offline features. I don't know. I want to say I don't have the answer, because the classic answer from a design perspective is it depends, because it does really depend on context and location and what people have access to. And the reality is so many people can access things on their mobile devices, and not everyone has a computer. So I think it really depends on how, if we think about who is using what we make, then we should really think about the fact that people might access it on any size screen.
Yeah, I agree. And I think this is actually a place where AI can play a very positive role. And that once you start getting into agentive artificial intelligence that lets you use AI to tell your browser what to do, make this bigger, change the contrast. And that's going to be a very powerful thing as well. But you're absolutely right that, this is all technology based, and not everyone has access to the most advanced technology. And that's a thing we really need to keep in mind when we're designing stuff, that some people may be accessing it on a very low bandwidth, some people may be accessing it offline, and we have to design to allow for those things.
Yeah, totally.
Do we have any other questions in the wings?
I always have more questions. I put one in there about the treasures in the appendix. And would you please tell us about those treasures back there? Because I just so happened to flip to the back of the book, and those AI prompts went directly into my instructions, just saying good stuff back there.
Yeah, so the appendix, that was a beast. And I want to thank, I have a wonderful assistant, Jed Diaz, who helps me a lot and helped me a lot to find the resources. So one, I know that a lot of folks are using AI. And so I put AI prompts as one of the first things, because you could, like in the first chapter, I talk about how AI is the missing ramp. It's often the missing ramp because AI is a big reflection, generative AI is a big reflection of us as a society. And as a society, and I don't care where you're from, we have a feeling about folks with disabilities. And so what I have noticed with the use of AI is its immense bias against folks with disabilities. So in order to counter that, I created those prompts for the back of the book, because I think that it's important to challenge the systems and tools that we use, especially when the tools that we use an authoritative voice. So one of the drawbacks I feel that exists within a lot of this generative AI is that it tells you something and it is super confident and authoritative in what it's telling you, and it is 100% wrong. So in order to bypass that, you have to ask the right questions. So I hope that the questions that and the prompts that I included in that first piece will help people decipher how to be, in essence, a critical thinker when you're using this tool. And let's not forget that it is a tool and not the answer, because you as a human being knows better. And then the other things that are included in that chapter, things related to gaming and definitions around that. I provide the laws around the world for all the countries that I could find. And that resource, back there came thanks to Lainey Feingold, who under Creative Commons has given access to all the legal stuff. So she's great. And Lainey's also my collaborator for that other book that you'll be talking about in a few months. So yeah, there's lots to, thank you, Sherry. Thank you, Sherry, for coming. Yeah, so there's lots of stuff back there.
Yeah, I really love the AI prompts stuff. You read a lot of stuff about people saying the trick with ChatGPT is you've got to work out the prompts properly. And that's all they say. You actually give practical examples of what to say, which is fantastic. Very unusual.
Was there any other question?
I think there was a question there from John. John, would you like to say your question?
Sure thing. I'll ask my question, but if I start cutting out, let me know, because I was having technical difficulties earlier. Okay. Thank you for joining us. This has been amazing. My question is, especially on that section of if it's annoying, it's not accessible. What about the scenarios where there isn't a clear-cut right solution, where what's best for one person might be worst for another? What's your thoughts and approaches on that?
Yeah, I mean, that's always going to be the case, I think, where, people are like, oh, dark mode is accessible. And it's like, not everybody can use dark mode, right? I think that, we have to think about it as options, right? And one of the things that I think we tend to forget about is that we can provide these options. We're the ones coding this, we're designing it, we're building it. And so if someone can see, they'll see it one way. If they can't see, how are they going to experience it? So I think when you think about it from an options perspective, it doesn't give you a correct answer, right? I love, I've been referencing Octavia Butler a lot now. She would say, for every question, there's 1,000 answers. Now, does it take more time to provide options? Yes. Will you get more people to use your product? Yes. Will you make more money? Yes. If you don't provide those options, then no, right? So I think it's a matter of accessibility. To me means that there's options. If I speak English or if I speak Spanish, I should be able to flip the switch, right? So I think that options is that's my answer to your question.
Thank you. And I didn't want to provide too much context. It's my belief. That's exactly what I tell people as well. So I'm glad to be in good company here.
Yeah, great.
Yeah. One of the things I enjoyed about the book was that you incorporate one of the fundamental principles that I say to people is that universal design and inclusive design are not the same thing. Universal design is when you design something that can be used by anybody without the need for any adaptation, which is terrific, but it doesn't always work. And inclusive design is designing things so that people can customize them for their own particular needs, whether that's through an assistive technology or building in options, choices about how you do it. So you have to kind of balance the two together to get truly inclusive design happening.
Yeah, agreed.
Okay, what have we got? Any other questions there?
I'll ask another question if we don't have any in the chat.
Go for it.
All right. So the first thing I noticed when going through this book was that it seemed like each chapter was broken up sort of so that somebody could hop in here and say, I am doing X job. What do I need to do to be accessible? And it seems like there is a chapter for that. My first question is, was that intentional? And the follow-up is, how did you collect all of that information about such a wide variety of subjects?
Well, I have an assistant, and I've had I don't do everything, I thank my assistants in the beginning. I had a lot of information and a lot of reading on my side in order to find, not only because a lot of the stories I told were personal ones in the book, so it wasn't just me going, okay, but I was like, this is a story people can relate to, right? And then, for example, in the first chapter with the AI stuff, I knew from years back there was a data set called Incluset, right? So when I was trying to research, I said, well, there has to be some data on bias and disability. And then I found this report. Well, actually, it was a YouTube. So it was a YouTube. I found it on YouTube initially. It was this like folks talking about AI and bias and things like that. So it was me thinking about what is relevant for folks and then finding the evidence to back that up. Yeah, I hope that answers your question.
Well, I'll go back to one of the questions I had nutted out. Was one of the things I liked about the book is that it brings together a lot of different perspectives on accessibility. An example of that is gaming. That's often segregated as something other than general accessibility, but you've wrapped it into the book as a whole with specific references. I wonder if you'd just like to talk a little bit about the importance of accessibility in gaming and why that is such a critical thing.
Yeah, so I wanted to mention gaming, as I mentioned it in that chapter. I tell my experience of receiving my first Nintendo, right? So, and getting what they called Nintendo. I had a repetitive stress injury as a child from playing a game so much, like my thumb was like, and so when I first came up with this, because I've done some advising for gaming in the past around accessibility, and so I was like, I think I should include it. And I actually initially had gaming and entertainment as one single chapter, but then it was as this book is long anyway, but that chapter was too long, so I decided to break it up into two. And then one of the reviewers for that chapter in particular, Rodrigo Sanchez, gave me some things that he felt were missing from that chapter. So I included those things that he mentioned. And there was a wonderful accessibility advocate, Brandon, who did a significant amount of work, who I wanted to honor and put in that chapter as well. He passed sadly a few years ago. So gaming is so huge, right? When we think about worldwide, how many people are using it and how many, gamers who want to play into their 60s, 70s, 80s. And for folks who are gaming and folks who have disabilities, currently it's their way to connect, and making sure that we can make these experiences accessible throughout, you know, disabled, non-disabled is so crucial, I think, especially with the amount of people that play games.
Yeah, very true. Thank you, Bobby, for that comment about the remarkable life of Evelyn, a documentary on Netflix that shows why accessibility and inclusivity is needed in gaming world. Sounds very interesting indeed. And that kind of makes me spin off onto, you already mentioned, entertainment as such. And that's another area that often gets kind of segregated from the general discussion about digital accessibility, but is something so pervasive. People use it so much. And in some ways, and Netflix is a good example, that they have advanced in how they offer audio description, complete different movies that you can access a different version of that has audio description included. What are your perceptions of how accessibility is progressing in the entertainment world, Reginé?
Well, and I don't think I wrote about it, but the reason why there's audio descriptions and the reason why there's captions is because there were lawsuits.
Right.
So, and I think that we have seen, and we are seeing that there is an increase, especially with social media and the captions, right? So people are on social media, those captions you don't know what's going on. No one really has sound turned on if you are hearing for that. And so and many years ago I was like, oh, I got interviewed by New York Times Kids Edition, which is a print only edition, where they had interviewed me about why are people using captions like in TikTok and stuff like this. And I said, because no one has a sound on, right? So I think making these things, what we're seeing now with entertainment and accessibility is, one, there's a need. Two, it's a want, right, from people to have things, especially with captions. I think it's a big deal. But I think also that what we're going to see is more accessibility, and I hope for more than just like what we're seeing it in gaming, right? Or like for live events. So because again, I forget what I wrote, but there's like a sports, like with sports and basketball, there's a for folks who are blind, there's this device that people can experience the game, right? Like in real time at live events. So I think we're going to see. I'm curious to see with the FIFA, with World Cup. I do mention FIFA in the book, but with the World Cup and we'll see how they do. I mean, in the past there have been accessible stadium experiences, right? So we do see these things. I've been to arenas where I see quiet rooms, which I think is great, right? To have that option where folks are able to get headphones for sound, right? Because not everybody can hear that. And I think that we need to see more of these kind of things. We need to, get a warning if there is going to be a loud boom, right, for people. I would like it, but it would also be really helpful for people who get startled easily from different type of disabilities and that nature. So I think we're going to be seeing some progress. At least that's my hope.
Yeah, I agree. And I think one of the things that is happening to some extent, needs to happen more, is that it is about independent access. So you see a lot of stuff in the past where people at football games, there's a person whispering in the ear of a blind person, describing to them what's going on. And that's fine and supported, but that person should also be able to access something that allows them without having to rely on somebody else to do that for them.
Yeah, totally.
One of the other questions that I've got is that there is, you do work in academia, and there is an aspect to the book that takes an approach that is certainly, evokes academia. You use a lot of footnotes, you got a lot of citations, a lot of references, and then the list of books at the end there. How important was it for you to put your thoughts and opinions in the context of other people's works? Does that make sense?
Yeah. So, I mean, I know this much, right? And a lot of people know way more than me. And I always say I don't know anything because I don't, right? The minute I do, I don't. And so getting those, using those citations in reference to what I think is important for people to learn and know was crucial to this book. And making sure that I cited them properly and getting people to be aware that, you know, this is one resource and there's so many other resources out there, right, that can be used in combination. I'm not the person, nor does my book have all the answers. It has some of them. And so it's, I think, important for folks to, in order to, and context really matters here, in order for people to get what they need to fit those, you know, that specific instance, they may need 5 different resources. It may just be one.
Yeah. There's an aspect to this too. I mean, I, and probably a lot of people in this book club, I love paper books. I love holding a book, all of that. But there is an advantage to the digital book in that all the footnotes are linked. All the references are linked, so you can jump straight to it. You can search through the book for anything. Like I just did a search for show me gaming, all the references to gaming throughout the book. There are some advantages to the digital book, and this makes great use of that technology, I think. It is, in some ways, the digital book is a whole other experience than the paper book.
Yeah, and thank you for sharing. I mean, I had to go and triple check those links. That was one of the things that took I was like, let me make sure I have the most up-to-date everything. So yeah.
No, I love it. I'm reading Tim Berners-Lee's new book at the moment, where he talks about the whole idea that kind of solidified what the web would be was the idea of the link, the hypertext link, being able to jump from one thing to another. And the digital version of your book is fantastic for that. You can jump all over the place. So it's great.
Yeah.
I'm not sure that I've got any more. Actually, one question that I had was how much you still do your own kind of user research. Do you do testing of stuff with people with disabilities? Get opportunity to do that?
I have in the past. I mean, I've been writing in the last couple of years, but yes, I have in the past. Right. Yeah.
Yeah. And you see that as a very important thing, that you actually do usability testing with people with disabilities?
Yes, and I believe in designing with and not designing for. That's one of the big things. And like for example, this semester, I co-teach with someone who's blind, right? And we do it together. And when we find, typically our students will work with a real life client, and they will be this semester. So they'll get to learn and talk with people with blindness and low vision. So it's really important to me to, you know, and even bringing in the technical reviewers. So Crystal Preston Watson, who has a vision impairment, and Lacey Corbello, who identifies as queer. Like, I made sure to like bring in an inclusive, you know, perspective from a technical review perspective as well. So I think designing with, not designing for, and definitely when you test, try to get as many people as possible. And I know people have to go, so I will say, people will tell me, well, I don't know anybody with a disability, and I was like, we all do.
Yeah, very true.
You know, and so I think it's always, you know, there is that opportunity for us, friends of friends or whatever it is. So I think that it's, you know, it's important that we make sure to be inclusive truly.
Yeah. Have you had at this point much kind of reaction from both people with disabilities and also the digital accessibility, I guess you call them, professional community to your book?
No, I mean, not yet. I'm not. I don't know how many people have read the book yet, but you all are the first folks that I'm talking to, so I haven't yet. It just came out in November, so
Yeah.
I haven't fully. And it's a again, it is to me it's a reference book, but it's quite intimidating, I think, when people see it, because it is quite thick. Yeah.
I think it is a book that will last for a long time, which is not something you can say about a lot of digital accessibility technology books. You know, they are kind of the moment. But I think because of the perspectives that you bring to it and the solid foundation of human use, I think it will last a long time and will be a big part of, you know, anybody who's interested in digital accessibility, particularly in emerging technologies. This is going to be a very valuable book for them.
Thank you so much, and thank you all for being here and sticking around. And thanks to my family and friends who are also here. My brother, my sister-in-law. So, thank you.
All right. Well, we should probably think about wrapping this one up now. I think we've covered most of the stuff. We should put a link in the chat too. We have a link on the Accessibility Book Club website to buying the book. If you're joining this and you haven't yet actually had a chance to get the book, you should. And like I said, I would recommend getting the ebook version. It's fantastic. I just found it so easy to use and so easy to read, and ideal for that notion of, it's not a start to finish book. It's a dip into it, use it as a reference work. Crystal, do you have any closing thoughts for our session today? Oh, Crystal's just gone off for a moment. John, would you like to say anything to close the session today?
The only thing I want to say is thank you for being here. Thank you to our author. Thank you to our guests. This has been an amazing session. Thank you for doing all of this work. I'm very much looking forward to going through it, because I, like Crystal, was skimming through to get little nuggets from each section, and I think that they are there. So thank you for your work.
Thank you all so much. It's an honor to be here, truly. I put a lot of work into that book, so thank you. And now it's no longer mine, it's yours. And you know, I was like, if people want to do it better, go and do it.
You've given it away so much, you don't even have your own copy anymore.
There you go.
Thank you so much for joining us. It was an absolute pleasure getting to know you.
It was great. Thank you very much, Reginé. And congratulations.
Bye,
And
everyone.
see you all next month.
Oh, yeah.
John and Ricky, if you want to stay for a minute to hang out with me, I'd love to chat after.
Sure thing.
Let's do it.
Bye, everyone.
Bye all.
Let me stop our recorder.